just before we have a little chat, I want to give a shout out to the wonderful Kerry Writers Group, of whom Gabriel is a part, because Listowel Writers Week are having their 50th year celebration this year from the 2nd to the 6th of June. And I'm just going to put in the link in the chat. There we go. So there's the link. So if you haven't enough literary wonderfulness tonight, then make sure to go along to the world famous Writers Week, which happens from the 2nd to the 6th of June. And I have very exciting news, Colin. Do you know what the exciting news is?
Go on.
We're going to have a live festival in September
Oh,
from
wow.
from the from the 16th to the 19th of September. So
Oh,
you're all welcome to come along, and I hope you do, you know. And
that's that's my birthday weekend, Maria. I,
you'll have to bring everybody, and
I'll be there.
we'll have a massive cake, and Paddy Regan will jump out of the cake for you, if that's not scary enough. So, and Colin is going off to headline at the Edge, the festival in the Edge. So I want to give a huge shout out to our colleagues, our storytelling colleagues in the UK. And I'm so delighted that the live festivals are coming back again. And that's coming up, isn't it? When is that, Colin?
That is 16th to the 19th of July. In fact, I'm on with Ruth. Ruth and I have got a wee double act going that weekend. So we have that right, Ruth?
Oh, that's brilliant. She's giving us the thumbs up because she's muted at the moment. So, listen, that's going to be brilliant. So, for anybody who's inoculated and has the vaccine done and is lucky enough to be able to travel, you can see it live. But hopefully, we get snippets as well. So there'll be people there with phones taking little snippets to whet our appetite for next year. So Colin is a singer-songwriter. He's a storyteller, and I've heard him tell a poem or two. So I never know what's going to come when we have Colin on. So I'm just going to remove myself and let Colin off. Go on.
Thanks, Maria. Yes, I'm doing a wee double act with Ruth throughout that weekend, which I'm really looking forward to. And we're calling ourselves North by Northeast because I'm up on the north coast of Ireland and Ruth is up in the northeast of Scotland, of course. But anyway, Ruth, I was all geared up to sing a song tonight, but then Ruth started talking about May and she started talking about fairies and things, and she put a story in my head. So, because May, as Ruth described it there, it's a month when the fairies are most active, but it's also a beautiful month. It's my favorite month. It's a month of lovely bluebells and bird song and the promise of summer just around the corner. And but also where I live, or there's the North Channel between the Glens of Antrim here and the Mull of Kintyre, which is only 12 miles away. There, a sudden swirling wind, a whirlwind can get up very often, and it's as destructive as any winter's gale that you might get. But anyway, we'll talk a wee bit more about that later as the story progresses. I want to take you to the island of Islay that Ruth also mentioned there, and a young girl called Morag. And she was being courted by a young fella from the other side of the North Channel on Rathlin Island, just off the north coast of Ireland. And his name was Rory. And the two of them were head over heels in love with each other. And he used to sail over to Islay as often as he could. And although it was only half a day's sailing, when they were parted, it was just like they were on opposite sides of the world. But he sailed over as often, or made an excuse to get over to Islay as often as he could. And when he would get there, him and Morag would go for these long walks along the western shore of Islay, through the maca, that long, lovely grass with the lovely May flowers growing in it. And when they were out walking, Morag would say to him, Rory, when we're married, show me, where shall we live? And Rory would point across the Sea of Moyle towards Rathlin Island. Well, this day, they were walking along, and of course, time passed. Time passed, and actually a year, and then May came round again. And during that time, of course, their love had grown and had taken its natural course, and Morag fell pregnant. Of course, she had to tell her mother, and her father was very upset about this. But her mother said, she's not the first, and she won't be the last. And a wedding just had to be hastily arranged. Well, despite her father's disquiet about this whole affair and the wee bit of shame that it might bring on the family, Rory's people all came over from Rathlin Island, and they had a grand time. 2 days and 2 nights of drinking and dancing and playing reels and jigs and hornpipes. They had a great time. And when the Calian was all over, Rory and Morag went for one more walk along the shore of Islay. And as they were walking through the lovely long grass of the macha and those lovely May flowers, Morag said, now that we're married, my love, where shall we live? Well, Rory pointed across the Sea of Moyle back over to Rathlin Island. And as they were standing there looking out across the sea, they saw this swirling, twisting column of air coming across the water towards them. They'd never seen anything like it. It whipped the surface of the sea into a white foam, and when it made landfall, it lifted pieces of driftwood and stones and flung them into the air. As it came closer, they could feel the cold air and the sea spray on their skin. Well, it got bigger and more ferocious the closer it came. And then something hit Morag on the head and knocked her to the ground. Rory was lifted up into that whirlwind, and he was thrown about like a rag doll. Well, when Morag came to, she looked down the field, and there, about 20 or 30 yards away, was young Rory lying in a crumpled heap, torn and tattered. And when she got to him, the colour had drained away from his skin. The spark had gone out of his eye. He was no more like the lively young fellow he had been just a short time ago than days like night. Well, help was summoned, and they got him back to Morag's people's place. He had changed. Something had changed in him. And he declined throughout that whole day. And by nightfall, the old people that were standing around, they knew that Rory was lying on his deathbed. Morag cried out, I pray, my love, that you will never be more than one night away from your bed. The poor girl was delirious with grief. She didn't know what she was saying. But before that night was out, young Rory died. Morag was grief-stricken. Her heart was broken in two. And Rory's people carried him back across the Sea of Moyle to Rathlin, and they waked his corpse, and they wrapped him up in a linen shroud. His corpse was like that of an old man. He had failed so much, and just in that one day, they took him to the graveyard, and they dug a grave, and they buried him there in among his ancestors. But of course, Morag was so grief-stricken, and she was in her confinement, in her condition. She couldn't travel across the Sea of Moyle, and she stayed in her parents' place and grieved and cried and sobbed. Well, she was so exhausted with everything that happened, she took to her bed, and she slept soundly. But during that night, something disturbed her sleep. It was a vision of Rory. She sat up in the bed, and by the half light of those glowing peats, she could see him. He looked hale and hearty. He was his young, strong, lively self again. My love, it cannot be you. It is your own true sweetheart, Rory, he said. Wheesht now, listen carefully. You must go to the wise woman. Tell her everything that has happened. She will help you. Well, in the morning, Morag told her mother and her father about this nocturnal visit from Rory. Oh, you poor girl, Rory is dead. His people have taken him off to Rathlin. They have buried him in the ground. You will never see him again. I saw him last night, she said. And she begged her mother to tell her where the wise woman lived. Well, when she entered the shack, the old woman said, come in, let me see you, let me get a good look at you. Morag, you'll be the widow of Rory Og from Rathlin. I am no widow, she said. Rory is alive. I have seen him. He told me to come to you. And well, Morag told the old woman the story that I've just told you. And the old woman sat for a long time and thought about it. And eventually she said, your man has been taken by the Lady of the Emerald Isle. What? Morag didn't know what she was talking about, and you may not know what I'm talking about either. And so the old woman explained to young Morag what the Lady of the Emerald Isle was. She said, for generations, the good folk, the gentle people, the fairies, have been back and forth across the Irish Sea, the North Channel, for generations, sometimes to Cayley, sometimes to quarrel. And when they travel in a band, they travel in a swirling, twisting whirlwind across the sea. And that wind can strip the thatch of a cottage. It can lift a beast in the air or a man. Rory was lucky that they didn't just dump him in the sea as they're sometimes wont to do. Morag was horrified. Have you a good heart and a steady hand, said the old woman, for you'll need both. If you falter or feel in any particular, you will never see Rory again. I will do whatever it takes, she said. Here's what you must do. Return to the exact spot that the Lady of the Emerald Isle took Rory. Bring with you a blade, a grass hook, a butcher's gully, but mine it must be as sharp as a razor. Wait there, and the Lady of the Isle will return sooner or later, and when she does, you must stand strong. Do not falter. No matter how big, no matter how fierce she is, stand your ground. And when she gets close enough, you must throw that blade into the heart of her and say these words. Take this, it is yours. Give me back what is mine. Can you do that? I can, said Morag. And so that's what she did. She got a blade, a grass hook, and she honed it until it was as sharp as a razor. She went down to the western shore of Islay, and there she waited. And right enough, very soon after, she saw this whirlwind spinning, swirling, and twisting, coming across the sea towards her. It was bigger and more ferocious than it had been the first time. And when it made landfall, it lifted driftwood and stones and flung them into the air. Morag stood her ground, although she was petrified with fear. And when it came so close that she thought it might lift her off her feet, she flung that blade into its heart. She said, this is for you. Give me what is mine. Well, that whirlwind went right over her, knocked her to the ground, went over her like a steam train. But from somewhere up in the middle of that swirling, twisting mass of air, dropped Rory out onto the ground. He was torn and tattered, but the colour was back in his cheeks. The light was in his eye. He was shaken and dishevelled, but he was alive and well. Well, the two young lovers threw their arms around each other. They kissed and they hugged and they wept and they laughed. And if the Keeley for the wedding feast was 2 days and 2 nights. They keelied for a week in honor of Rory's return. And Morag said to him, "My love, now that you're back, where shall we live?" And he pointed across the sea to Rathlin, and that's where they went. Now, you may be wondering what was buried in that grave. Well, when Rory got back to Rathlin, everybody gathered in the graveyard, and with the permission of the parish priest, they opened that grave. That soil that had been so sadly shoveled in just a few days before was removed. And when they found that corpse wrapped in a linen shroud, they took it out and unwrapped all that linen. And what they found was a big, gnarled, twisted lump of bog oak. Well, Morag and Rory went into that grave, but not for many, many years, for they lived a long and happy life together and reared a family on Rathlin Island. But they would go over to Islay often to visit Morag's people, but never, ever in the month of May, when the Lady of the Emerald Isle is most often on the move.
Wow. That was mighty, Colin. Oh my goodness. Beothna honna Eve, you know. So Beothna magic keeps coming, you know. That was brilliant. Loved it. Mwah. And now we've heard a story from Colin in the south because we were used to hearing them up north, and we've heard you sing. Now we've heard a gorgeous story from you. So hopefully you'll come back. Come back, Colin, down south, and we'll talk to you again. For now, I'm going to let you free from this spot